Hey all, and welcome into the 5 best chess opening traps in the central game. The central game occurs after the first moves pawn to e4, pawn to e5, and here comes d4. Therefore, you can implement these traps in your practical games really easily. Moreover, we're not only gonna see these beautiful games, which are really amazing, but also you'll be able to train your tactical vision along the way, and I'll show you how you can find beautiful tactical shots. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead with the trap number 1. It's actually the game of David Bernstein playing white, who is one of the legendary players of the past. As you may notice, it's actually somewhat similar to the Scandinavian defense with the reversed colors. Black played knight f6, knight c3, so far everything is very logical. Black plays pawn to d5, also seems good. And here comes the first good move from Bernstein. A lot of players in similar situations take pawn automatically, but if you follow me for a long time, you know that to take is a mistake and you gotta increase the pressure, which is exactly what Bernstein did. He played bishop to g5. He actually attacks that knight on f6 that controls these same squares e4 and d5. Therefore, Bernstein tries to put more and more pressure on the black center. Black captured the pawn, white recaptured, and here black played queen to e7. And it looks like white is in some sort of little bit trouble because of that pin on the knight along the e-file, and the knight can't move away because there's the white's king behind it. Again, it may seem like the only thing that white should be doing is either protecting this knight or maybe taking with the bishop the black's knight on f6. But Bernstein did a pretty cool thing. Instead, he just really ignored the black's threat. He made long castling. And perhaps his opponent thought that Bernstein just did not realize that black can simply grab the knight, which he did by playing queen takes e4. But there is a great tactical shot that you can try to find by yourself here before I'm going to show it to you. Therefore, you have 5 seconds to think about this position. It is white to play. How would you play here as white? Can you find the winning move? After this move, black actually just resigned right away. It is the move rook to d8, which sounds like a shocker, like a very unexpected move, with the purpose of provoking black's king to go to d8, because black can't capture with the knight. It is pinned by the queen, and therefore black has to capture the rook by the king, which puts the black's king under the pin. And while the black's knight is pinned, now white can grab the black's queen for nothing. Black can't recapture because the knight is pinned by the bishop. Because of that, white wins the queen and black just resigned. A really beautiful combination by white, and that was the first trap that I wanted to share with you. And as you can see, all the moves by both sides are pretty natural, and therefore it's a really cool thing. Before we move on, let me just give you a quick tip on how you can find these kind of moves yourself, in case you couldn't find it. Don't worry, it was a very sudden move, and therefore if you couldn't notice it yourself, it's a absolutely normal thing. How can you find the moves like that? The rule says you always need to look for checks. If you can check opponent's king, there is the only thing that your opponent can do, which is to move the king or to protect the king, somehow to cover it. And therefore it makes your calculation very easy because you know exactly what your opponent is going to do. You don't have to calculate tons of variations. Therefore, as I say, check a check, right? Check if you can produce a check. And if you follow this simple rule, check a check, you will find great quantity of forcing winning continuations. Alright, let's move on to the trap number 2. Of course, it begins by the first moves e4, e5, pawn to d4, the central game, and the first moves are very common, knight to c6, and here white played queen e3, which is actually the main move in this variation. By the way, I gotta say that even though central game is probably not the strongest opening of all, but it's still a pretty decent choice, and you may try it from time to time, especially in the blitz games. It could be a dangerous weapon. Here black played bishop to b4. Fairly often black refrain from putting the knight to f6 because they worry that you're gonna push it by your pawn to e5, and therefore black tries to come up with some other sound alternatives. And that's how black can start playing something like bishop b4. White pushed the bishop away, it went back to a5, white played bishop c4, black developed his knight to e7. I guess the reason is still the same. Black worries that in case the knight goes to f6, white can kick it away by pushing the pawn forward, and therefore black developed the knight to a modest square e7. White continued with queen to g3, and as you may notice, it's a very straightforward threat. White is going to capture the pawn. Of course, by now it seems that black can protect it very easily by doing a natural move, castling. And yet, it allows white to continue, or at some point even to begin his attack. White played pawn to h4. Now, what's the purpose of this move? Instead of pawn to h4, white could have tried to start his assault right away by playing bishop to h6, taking advantage of the pin over the g-file. And at first it may sound like a powerful move, but if you may notice, black can cover his king fairly easily just by playing knight to g6, and the white's attack is over. And that's the reason why white decided to push his h-pawn, because by doing so he can kick that knight away. Anyway, this is just a sideline. Let's come back to the main game, and here white played pawn to h4, because that pawn can possibly help white in his attack in the future. Black still played knight to g6. He feels that there is some sort of danger around his king and he wants to cover it. White continued pawn to h5, knight to e5, attacking the white's bishop on c4, and now of course black probably expected the bishop to retreat, but white found a much more powerful continuation. He played bishop to g5, attacking black's queen on d8. As you may notice, there is the only square available for the queen to go to, therefore black played queen to e8, and at this point there is a winning continuation for white. It's a little bit of a complex operation because you need to calculate a few moves ahead, but anyway, give it a try. Can you find the winning continuation in this game? Try to calculate the lines for a few seconds. Were you able to find anything powerful? White has the move bishop f6, which wins the game on the spot. Right now the threat is very straightforward. White is going to capture the pawn on g7. Notice that the pawn cannot capture the bishop because it's pinned. There is black's king behind it. Therefore, the only way for black to somehow protect the g7 square is to move the pawn forward, play pawn to g6. But of course, now white wants to capture that pawn. And what can black do? In case he captures with the h-pawn, there is a fairly obvious checkmate in one move by playing rook to h8. By the way, this is a very common tactical pattern, or rather the setup of the white's pieces, with the bishop standing here and rook on h8. You will find this kind of pattern in many tactical exercises as well as in the practical games. That's why definitely black shouldn't recapture by the pawn. Instead, he wants to capture by the knight. And at first, it may seem that there is no easy way for white to continue his attack. By the way, black is also going to capture the pawn on e4 and disturb the white's king. Can you notice what can white do instead? Oh yeah, he's got a lot more stronger idea. He can grab that knight on g6, forcing black to recapture, which allows white to deliver that mate rook to h8. That was the trap number 2, and I hope that you also remembered this tactical pattern because, as I said earlier, the bishop on f6 really controls all the squares around the black's king. Therefore, if you can just deliver your bishop there, that'll create a lot of checkmate opportunities for you. That's been the trap number 2, and let's move on to the third trap. It's interesting that it is a practical game, and in this game, white actually did not find the winning continuation, even though he set a really clever trap, but unfortunately he couldn't find the winning continuation himself. Let's try to do it now. In this case, black played bishop e7, white replied with knight to c3, knight f6, bishop d2. It's fairly common for white in this opening to prepare long castling because the white's queen is already developed, and therefore it's somewhat easier for white to prepare long side castling. Black played pawn to d5, again, very natural move. Usually, in an opening, both sides are trying to fight for the control over the central squares. And of course, there was no other way for black to develop his queenside pieces anyway. White recaptured, and even though of course black could just take the pawn by his knight, instead he played knight b4, which also looks interesting. The knight is attacking that pawn on c2, which would be a dream capture for black, of course, because it attacks all of the white's valuable pieces. And black is preparing to grab on d5 with this knight on the next move. White castled. Black took on d5 with the knight from f6 because he just realized that in case white recaptures, instead of simply grabbing the knight back, he can make an intermediate move, winning the pawn and weakening the white's kingside position, or rather I should say castle position. Black took the pawn, it's checked, therefore white has to react. White moved the king, and now black took back the knight. Black was probably happy at this point. Because of this intermediate capture knight takes a2, black managed to win a pawn and also somewhat compromise the position of the white's king. In the actual game, white tried to attack by playing rook to e1, hoping to somehow attack along the e-file, but black simply replied bishop to e6, closing the line, and nothing happened. Black won this game afterwards. If you wish to see the entire game, you can download the PGN file with all the games that I'm going to show you in this lesson. You can find the link down below in the video description. But let's see if white could do anything better. And definitely white could. There is actually a winning continuation. White here should have played pawn to b3, with a very straightforward threat of taking the knight, and here black would have to regret about his decision to move his knight so further away from his forces. The only way for black to save the knight would be to move the knight back to b4. But here there is another common tactical pattern that I would like you to remember. Notice that in the black's position there are some pieces, in particular the queen and the knight, that are somewhat distant from the rest of the forces of black. And these pieces, they're not really well protected by other pieces of black. We call them hanging pieces, meaning that they are somewhat shaky. In case you notice hanging pieces in opponent's position, you always can try to look for the ways to take advantage of this situation. And in this case, this way exists. Can you find the winning continuation for white here? Of course, white can't just take that knight on b4, because in that case black would be able to recapture the white's rook on d1. Therefore here white would simply lose the exchange. But there is a better thing that white can do. And if you are careful listening to this video, I hope that you manage to find the winning continuation, because you gotta look for a check. As you know, it's very often the powerful continuation of an attack or a powerful beginning. In this case, it's rather a beginning. White should have took that bishop on e7, and after king takes, white played bishop b4, check, and also discovered attack of the black's queen. The only way to protect the queen would be to bravely move the king forward, but it doesn't really help because white can't play bishop c4. Using the pin, white forces black to take, and as you can see at the end of the line, white has an extra knight, which means that white is winning. Really beautiful combination. If you manage to find it, congratulations. If not, don't worry, that's exactly the reason why we are doing this training now, so that you can strengthen your tactical vision and learn new tactical patterns. Alright, let's move on. This time we're gonna see the trap for black. What if your opponent plays central game? How should you react? Here is one of the interesting ways to do so. At this point, we know that queen a3 is the main move, bishop b4, one of the good opportunities for black. White plays c3, pawn to a5, bishop c4. We have seen this move order already, just from white. And now, in the game that we have observed, black played knight to e7. He was afraid to move his knight to f6 instead, which is a more natural square for knight to be developed to, because black was obviously worrying that white would kick it away by pushing his pawn forward to e5. And in this point, I'd like you to think about the things that black can possibly do. And how would you play here as black? By the way, it's a general tactical motif that you can use throughout any of your games, of course. It's not just for this specific position. Very often, if your piece is under an attack, we automatically start thinking, where should it go? Like, should it go to g4, should it go back to g8, and we start calculating those lines. But there is a lot more powerful idea that you can ask yourself about. Ask yourself about this question. Can you ignore an opponent's threat, or can you counterattack? If you just develop it into a habit instead of automatically reacting to opponent's threat, asking yourself these two questions, can I ignore an opponent's threat or can I counterattack, I guarantee that you will advance your chess to the next level. In this position, for instance, black can very calmly castle kingside, just showing to white that his move pawn to e5 was just a total waste of time, because white can't capture that knight anyway. In this case, black would play rook to e8, taking advantage of the pin along the e-file, winning the white's queen. Therefore, in this case, black would win the game on the spot, and even more so, I hope that you learned this powerful idea on how you can react to opponent's threats. With that being said, let's move on to the last trap of this video, which is probably the most beautiful one, so I'm really excited to show it to you. Let's have a look. Here's the last game for today, and as promised, it's a really cool one. The first moves are still the same. White plays queen to e3, black plays knight f6, bishop c4, and here black played knight to e5. At first it seemed like rather a waste of time, because white can obviously retreat so easily with the bishop. But all of a sudden there was actually an idea behind it. Black continued bishop b4, pawn to c3, and here black realized that there is a difference. Instead of retreating with the bishop to a5, there is a more powerful thing that black can do. Can you find the right move for black here? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. It's really cool. Black played bishop to c5, attacking the white's queen, and inviting the queen to grab that bishop, which is left unprotected, because in this position black can deliver a very nice fork or double attack, knight to d3 with a double attack to the white's king and the queen. Therefore white is gonna lose her majesty. Of course white does not want this to happen, and therefore instead of taking the bishop, white played queen g3, the most natural looking move, which attacks the knight, attacks the pawn on g7, and it looks like it actually creates some little bit of problems for black. However, black came with a really powerful counter blow here. Can you notice the right move for black here? Let me remove those arrows so that you can see the position clearly, and I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Can you find the right move for black here? It's really amusing that black managed to use the same tactical motif, fork, once again in a really beautiful way. He took bishop takes f2. Very sudden combination out of nothing. Here, as you may notice, in case white captures it with the king, there comes knight to takes e4 with, once again, the fork. Double attack on the white's king and queen. Therefore here white loses. Let's take a step back. In case white decides to grab that annoying bishop with a queen, the fork comes from another side, this time knight d3. It's really cool how black managed to overutilize these tactical motifs within just two moves. And I really want you to remember this tactical motif, because pin, fork, and check are the three most common, most frequent tactical motifs that will occur in your games many times. Alright? So, as you can see here, black really made great use of this tactical motif fork, and if you pay attention to it, you will be able to find it in your games just like that. By the way, in case you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'm here to help, and therefore I'll be glad to answer your any questions. In case you wish to see the entire games that I've shown you today, you can download them by clicking the link down below in the description.
Hey guys, Igor is here, and if you enjoyed this video, there is one more thing that you may enjoy just as well. I'm excited to invite you to my new YouTube channel, which is not about chess, surprisingly, but about personal development. In simpler words, this is something that helps you achieve your different goals in life faster and easier. Whether you need to study efficiently, you want to graduate, or you want to start your business in IT or in any other industry, or you want to get out of debt, in general become a more productive person, increase your concentration, your memory, and achieve greater results in life, that channel will help you do just that. Let me show you a little bit of what you can find there, and it's free of charge.
Here on the YouTube channel of Key to Victory, you can find a lot of different videos about how to be more productive, how to be the best you, develop good habits, boost your energy, increase your focus, your concentration, learn foreign languages easier, and whatnot. As you can see, there's really tons of great stuff here. As well as you can check out the Key to Victory website, where you can see also a lot of the text articles if you prefer that format. And here you may choose the category that you love more, starting from business success, career, confidence, emotions, and whatnot.
Since you know me as a chess coach and grandmaster, you may be surprised to see me in this new role, and you may even wonder, why do I even talk about those subjects? But in fact, even though chess rocks, and I love it, absolutely, it's a big part of my life, but it's not the only thing that I do in life. I'm also a graduated psychologist, I started several businesses, I invest money, I travel around the world, and on top of all that, I'm a big fan of personal development, which is the art, the science of becoming the best version of yourself and increasing your performance and therefore your results in different areas of life. If that resonates with you, go check this out and we'll crush our goals together. If not, no worries, I'll keep serving you through chess. Either way, go check this out and I'll be happy to keep serving you either just in chess or in this new endeavor as well. Remember, you're awesome, take care, and I'll talk to you in the next videos.